Well, thank you, Dr. Wilson. In a few hours, I'll be flying back to Fort Myers, Florida, where the Fort Myers Red Sox play in spring training. I hear that they leave Fort Myers at the end of March, early April, and they fly to Boston, where they take on another name, the Boston Red Sox. But congratulations on your championship, and we do love them in Florida, and I hope some of you all can come down to Fort Myers and see the real Red Sox play, the Fort Myers Red Sox. Thanks to Keith, and thanks to Sam, and thanks to everybody at Gordon College. It's great to come back. It's frightening after 40 years to see pictures of Dr. Wilson and myself the way we were. I'm going to take it back to my family. They'll never believe it. And to Dr. Wilson, I could spend all my time praising him and the great contributions he makes. He continues, that's our Gesundheit, to the work. He continues to teach and inspire generations of Gordon students. You all are very lucky to have him on your campus, and you're even more lucky if you take a course from him. So here's a question for you all. Students of history, religion, psychology, theology, sociology, political science, social work, Bible, whatever your field is, and every other discipline, how can we understand and explain the Jewish people's passion and long-standing commitment to social justice? Why has this commitment been transmitted from generation to generation to generation in good times and bad? And why is social justice such a major part of the Jewish people's self-identity? Let me put it another way. Is there something in the Jewish DNA that's made so many of them activists and champions of what we call social justice? It's important to remember that this commitment to social justice is not 21st century, feel good, do good, think good works, and do them. This goes back centuries and centuries and centuries and has been passed down from generation to generation. Where did it all start? And how did it happen? Well, I'll get to that in a moment. But this extraordinary focus on social justice is embedded not only in the Jewish people here in Massachusetts, in the United States, and throughout the world, but also in the state of Israel. Now, I know that the state of Israel does not sufficiently carry out all of this high social justice goals, but name one nation, including our own, the United States, that carries out a coherent, comprehensive, compassionate program of social justice. God knows, and we know, especially God knows, that this country and all countries have a long way to go to fulfill the pledge of social justice for its citizens. But we strive as a nation, as a people, to reach that goal. So in 2012, just a year ago, a poll was taken by the Public Religious Research Institute to find out why Jewish people have such a commitment to social justice. And they found that the majority of American Jews, your neighbors, maybe members of your family, quote, are welcoming of immigrants, favorably disposed to American Muslims, support legalizing same-sex marriages, favor legal abortions, and oppose overturning the recent health care law, and are champions of separation of church and state, religion and state. The same survey asked the same large number of American Jews, which qualities, which issues are central to you in your Jewish identity? 46%, almost half of them, said that a commitment to social justice is their major source of Jewish identity. In second place was a commitment to the survival and security of the state of Israel and its citizens. And third was carrying out religious observances, prayer, Bible reading, holiday observances, and religious practices. That came in third. But first, 46% said social justice is their key identity as an American Jew. Now, what are the issues? If I had a big chart here, I would lay them out, but you can imagine what they are, because you all here at Gordon also share many, many of them. I learned from Dr. Wilson this morning. First is the care for the poor and the poverty-stricken, to which I would say, hello, Pope Francis. Here, hello, welcome to that. The collection and allocation of charitable funds, the safety and security and pay equity of workers, employers, and the support of trade unions, housing the homeless, provisions of health care for all American citizens, environmental sustainability, not just crime and punishment, but hopefully rehabilitation of those in prisons, empowerment of women, civil and human rights for all citizens of the United States, and ethics in business and in the marketplace. Now, what accounts for this love affair that Jews have, and there's no other word for it but love affair with social justice? Where does this come from? To better one's community here in Massachusetts, or the United States, or the world? What are the sources of it? Did it come out of space, out of the air? Did some mother or father just say, you should try to do social justice in the world? My answer is no, not at all. The answer begins, as you heard from Sam this morning, from the Hebrew Scriptures. That collection of ancient books that we Jews call the Tanakh. Some people call it the Old Testament. That's a term I don't particularly use. But Tanakh is an acronym for Torah. Nevi'im means prophets, and Ketuvim means writings. And you put it together, the Hebrew, it's Tanakh. It's an acronym like NASA is about space, or USAF, the United States Air Force, which I served as a chaplain, a military chaplain in Japan and Korea. And in fact, it was my Air Force experience in Asia, working with Christian clergy, that got me very interested in interreligious affairs as part of my rabbinic career. Now, within the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, whatever you may choose to call it, I counted at least 39 specific references to social justice. You heard one of them read quite well from Isaiah by Sam just a few minutes ago. And because, as I said yesterday, right here, because the New Testament was written almost exclusively by Jews, for Jews, and about one particular Jew, Jesus of Nazareth, I counted at least 28, and I wasn't done counting. I was still on the plane flying up from Fort Myers, counting the number of references in the New Testament to what we would call social justice. Now, as the poet Elizabeth Barrett Browning, I hope you read her stuff in English literature, as Elizabeth Barrett Browning said, let me count the ways. Let me count the ways in which the concept and practice of social justice is described in the Tanakh. And I'll read just a few of them. They're not all 39 of them, or now 38 because Sam read one of them. But there's one in Isaiah, the first chapter. And now it's not myself speaking, this is Isaiah. Learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, plead for the widow. Zechariah, thus says the Lord of hosts, render true judgment, show kindness and mercy to one another. Do not oppress the widow, the fatherless, the orphan, the sojourner among you, or the poor, and let none of you devise evil against one another in your heart. Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu in Hebrew, 22, verse 3. Do justice and righteousness, and deliver from the hand of the oppressor him who has been wronged and robbed. And do no wrong or violence to the resident alien. the stranger in your midst, the immigrant, the fatherless, the widow, and do not shed innocent blood in this place. Proverbs chapter 3. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and the needy. And then perhaps the most famous from all of the Tanakh, the book of Micah. It's been told, O man, what is good and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Back to the book of Proverbs. Open your mouth for the mute, for those who cannot speak, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and the needy. And then the prophet Amos. Therefore, because you trample the poor and extract taxes of grain from him, you have built great houses of hewn stone, trophy houses from the backs of the workers. But you shall not dwell in those houses. You have planted pleasant vineyards, but you shall not drink their wine. For I know many are your transgressions, and great are your sins. You afflict the righteous. You take a bribe. You turn aside the needy at the gate. Therefore he who is prudent will keep silent in such a time, but seek good and not evil, that you may live. And so the Lord God of hosts will be with you. Hate evil. Amos still continuing. Love good and establish justice at the gate. Again, Amos, which this is a quote that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. used many, many times. Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. And then back into the Torah itself, into the book of Exodus, chapter 23, verse 9. You shall not oppress a sojourner, the stranger in your midst. You know the heart of a sojourner, of a stranger, for you were strangers and sojourners in the land of Egypt. Now, since I am speaking at Gordon College, one of America's most prominent Christian colleges, I want to be an equal opportunity supplier of texts. So that's from the Tanakh. But it should not be a surprise to any of you here at Gordon that there are nearly 30 that I counted social justice references in the New Testament. That's because, as Dr. Marvin Wilson, who's taught his students with extraordinary clarity and brilliance for many years, that's because the Tanakh was the only sacred text that the New Testament authors and Jesus of Nazareth knew, and it was the Tanakh. So here are just a few from the New Testament. Not too many. There are at least, I counted, 28, 29. Matthew, maybe a little strange for a rabbi to be quoting from the New Testament, but after all, my people wrote the books. So Matthew 25, 31, 46. For I was hungry, and you gave me food, and I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. And then my favorite book in the New Testament, James. I love the name very much. James chapter 1. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God is this: to visit the orphans and the widows in their affliction, and to keep one's self unstained from the world. And then the book of Luke, chapter 4. And you all know these verses, you're Gordon students. Proclaim liberty to the captives, recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, and to proclaim the year of God's favor. But let me be very clear now. It would be a great mistake on your part, and it would be inaccurate on your part if you said, well, we limit the source and the sources of the Jewish commitment to social justice just to biblical texts, that's all there were. That's it. Just read those texts, and that's all there was to the Jewish passion for social justice. But again, Dr. Wilson has taught here at Gordon that Judaism is a living, like Christianity, is a living religious tradition. It's an organism that has survived because of its ability to hold firm to the foundational documents within the Bible, the Tanakh, while at the same time it's flexible and creative enough to adapt to various historical and geographical and chronological locations. If you do not have those qualities of the ability to adapt, Judaism centuries ago, in my judgment, would have atrophied, become static and stale, and perhaps faded from the stage of world history. I said yesterday, and I'll repeat it very quickly, it's what we Americans are trying to do as we have 220 plus years of independence. We're trying to maintain a text called the Constitution, which was written in Philadelphia in the 18th century by men only, by candlelight. And here we are in the 21st century with Twitter and Facebook and television and computers and email and jet planes and rockets to the moon and to Mars, and a diverse population which is 100 times the size of the United States population when the Constitution was written, and a very diverse population, far different than 1787. So how do you keep that text alive and fresh and meaningful 220 years later? And for Jews, how do you keep the biblical texts that I just read, and many more, alive and fresh and meaningful in everyday life thousands of years later? So let me show you how social justice was kept alive and actually touched the lives of the Jewish people in the post-biblical period. Only 3 examples. There are many, many, many other citations in the post-biblical period. These are selections from the Talmud. Now, many of you know what the Talmud is, but it's a vast collection, for those who don't know, a vast collection of Jewish religious thought, literature, sometimes even poetry, jurisprudence, philosophy, theology, teachings, history, ethics, morals, case law, and customs. The Talmud is called the Sea, S-E-A, the Sea of the Talmud. Why? Because if you think the Bible is a large collection of books, the Talmud, which was compiled by the rabbis, my spiritual colleagues, in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th century, the Christian era, the Common Era. This is a collection of work written mostly in Hebrew and Aramaic. It has 63 sections, 2,600 printed pages, and about 2 million words. So it is a sea, and you try to swim in it and learn a little bit. But let me give you just 2 examples from the Talmud about social justice, which has had a tremendous impact on the Jewish people. The rabbi said, we must sustain the poor, both those who are poor, who are Jewish, and those who are not. We must visit the sick, both those who are Jewish and those sick men and women who are not Jewish. And we must, as a community, bury the dead who are Jewish, and we must also bury the dead of those men and women who are not Jewish. We do all these things for the sake of God and for the sake of peace. Second selection from the Talmud. And this is a rabbi who's very upset, as you'll soon see why he was upset and why you should be upset. Something is fundamentally wrong about the details of the law that troubles me deeply, this rabbi wrote. For if we explain the text that I've cited according to their simple meaning, it's that certain groups are more entitled than other groups to charity and philanthropic money, and that you don't have to give to people outside your own group. If this is true, and I cannot accept this, the rabbi said, that means poor people in our community who do not have wealthy relatives or a high station in life or high education or social standing, they will die of starvation. How can we allow this to happen? Therefore, in my opinion, real righteousness, social justice, means this. Every person, whether of modest or significant means, whether of influence or not in the community, is obligated to give a portion of his or her money to needy people who may not be their relatives, who may not be their family. In places where there are no wealthy relatives, it is the community then that must support the poor in that community. People must act this way. One example from the book of Deuteronomy, it talks about chapter 21. In a city, they find a dead body outside the city gates. It's what we call in police work a dead John Doe. We don't know who it is. The body can't be identified. There are no relatives. No, we don't know who killed the person. We don't even know who the person is. It's a body outside the city gates. It's Deuteronomy 21, 1-9. So the rabbis said, we have to accompany this body. And what do they mean by accompany? We have to provide a proper burial for this stranger. We have to solve the crime of who killed this person. We have to do justice, even though we don't know this person, though this person is we can't identify, and even though this person lives outside the city gates. And that's what they did. They took care of everyone and gave them a proper burial and tried to solve the crime. But what I want to focus on is that last part. The body is outside our city gates, and there are some in our city, the rabbi said, they said, don't bother with that. It's a dead body. We don't know who it is. It doesn't belong to anybody in the community. We don't know who it is. Leave it alone. And the rabbi said, well, what are the city gates? And I'm asking you, on December the 6th, 2013, what are the city gates of Wenham? There are no city gates anymore. We are linked to all cities, all communities, all villages, and all peoples, not by geographical proximity, but certainly by electronic proximity, by travel, by television, by telephone, by Skype, by email, by Twitter, by Facebook. So murders, atrocities, injustices, criminal acts that are committed far from where we live, but we dwell in a global village, and we must, as a principle of social justice, take care of and accompany all those who are victims of injustice, whether living or dead. That means we are obligated by God, we are obligated on our part, even if we didn't commit the crime, even if we're not responsible for the injustice, even if we didn't create the poor, even if we don't mistreat the immigrants, they are all in our village. We all live together. It's a very powerful, very demanding insight. There's one other teaching from the post-biblical period that the rabbis taught, which has really been an anchor in my own personal life. A person who destroys one life, just one, it's as if that person has destroyed the entire world. And the person who saves just one life, the person who saves just one life, it's as if that person has saved the entire world. So you don't have to save millions and hundreds of thousands in floods and earthquakes and tornadoes and hurricanes and epidemics. But if you save one life, it is as if you have saved the entire world. But if you destroy one life, you destroy the entire world. Jews today have a Hebrew expression, again, that Dr. Wilson, I'm sure, has taught his students for many years, Hebrew called tikkun olam. It means repairing the world. Jews, certainly with our history, are under no illusion that the world is complete, free of bigotry, prejudice, poverty, hatred, disease, and many other problems. As a result, we are constantly called upon by our God to repair, restore, and rehabilitate the world, tikkun olam, social justice at its best. During what we still call the Middle Ages, Jewish communities were forced to live in segregated areas of communities that were called ghettos. Ghetto is from an Italian expression. The first ghetto was in Venice, and Jews lived often locked in at night behind walls, never allowed to live everywhere in the city. But within the ghetto, there was squalor and poverty, discrimination from the outside. But Jews said, okay, we're living in a ghetto, but we're still going to develop social justice. So we're going to develop our own schools, our own medical care, our own support for orphans and widows. We're going to aid the poverty-stricken. We're going to create burial societies and a host of other services. So while the outside of the ghetto walls, maybe there were people who hated Jews, Christian and Muslim religious leaders and Christian or Muslim political leaders, inside the ghetto, there was education, there was social welfare, and there was health care. These self-contained communities were, in a sense, filled with mercy and compassion. In the Jewish tradition, if you are faced with a choice between justice and compassion, and you have to weigh the two, justice or compassion, the Talmud, speaking for God, says God favors compassion, mercy over justice. Again, a rather radical teaching. Justice is one thing, very important, but compassion and love and mercy trumps justice. Now, it's very, very important that you understand that within almost every Jewish personal memory bank, in their head and in their heart, is this long, long tradition of social justice. Taking care of the physical, mental, psychological, spiritual needs of a community that's rooted on biblical and post-biblical tradition. I want to be very personal here. My late father, whose name, I love his middle name, I think you'll like it too. His name was Philip Gordon Rudin. My father was scarred by America's Great Depression that began in 1929. But he believed strongly that the Jewish community and all minorities are always safer living in a society of economic well-being, low unemployment, good medical care, excellent educational opportunities for everyone, that social justice is a foundation stone to guarantee security for all citizens. And that meant social justice for the least among us. It means compassion for the homeless, the poor, the unemployed, the widow, the orphan. The widow and the orphan are real in the Jewish tradition, but they're also symbols of all those who desperately need, because of their situation in life, the gift of social justice. I just completed a biography of the late Rabbi Stephen Wise, who died in 1949, who was the teacher of all of us in social justice. He was a rabbi who was interested in child laborers, helpless and battered women, long before it was fashionable to be committed to the support of women who were battered and helpless, human slave traffic, strangers in his midst, including immigrants and especially Asian immigrants, African Americans, labor, trade union, underpaid factory workers, he would say today, underpaid fast food workers, host of other people who required justice in their lives. He acted for all of them. And this is what he said. This is Stephen Wise speaking. And it sounds like the prophets, because he was a modern prophet. He said, and listen closely as we close, "To me, neither religion nor politics is remote. Religion is a vision or ideal of life. Politics is a method of life. To say that a rabbi, priest, or minister should not go into politics is to imply that the ideal and the reality are alien to one another. And then his great line, he said, politics is what it is because religion keeps out of it. I'm persuaded that the rabbi, priest, or minister should get into politics without partisanship, without compromise. We must all fight for justice, not only for ourselves in our own little group, not just for evangelicals or Catholics or African Americans or Jews or Hispanics, but Stephen Wise said we have to fight for all peoples, never forgetting that justice is for all or for its none. On a personal note again, I close with 3 examples from my own life. In February 1964, I spent a week in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, marching in front with pickets and placards in front of the Forest County courthouse in behalf of African American voting rights. I want to tell you that no one in this room at that time could have qualified for voting in Mississippi. 32-page questionnaire, had to recite and write out verbatim certain constitutional articles and amendments from memory. It was a whole horrible thing. And we marched, and I was in an interreligious group with Christian ministers as well as rabbis. And the campaign went on for many weeks. I've been back to Hattiesburg, and we were successful. We wanted equal voting rights for all U.S. citizens based upon social justice. 20 years later, in 1984, I was in another interreligious effort, because I like to march, I really do. This was in behalf of social justice, and today is a very good day to remember it, the South African Embassy in Washington, D.C. We, of course, lost Nelson Mandela yesterday. Christians and Jews, priests, ministers, rabbis, and laymen and laywomen marched in front of the South African Embassy in Washington, D.C. at the time. We were arrested, we were fingerprinted, we were handcuffed, and finally we were released. During the same period, I was on another march, also arrested, in front of the former Soviet Union's consulate in New York City on 68th Street. The cause was freeing Soviet Jews and evangelical Christians in the USSR who wanted to freely practice their religion. And again, I was arrested for the 3rd time in my life. And again, I was handcuffed, fingerprinted, taken to the police station, and finally we were released. So I said I like to march in such social justice events. It's good for me, keeps me honest, and it reminds me that social justice is not just for my own people, but it's, as Stephen Wise said, it's for all people. So let me say in closing, as I marched on those occasions, I recited in Hebrew the 3 biblical words, tzedek, tzedek, tirdof. It's from Deuteronomy 16, verse 20. Righteousness, righteousness, you shall pursue. And each time I marched, South Africa Embassy, Soviet Consulate, Hattiesburg, Mississippi, Forest County Courthouse, I was haunted, was driven, not just by the DNA in me about social justice for all peoples or for no people, because unless all people have social justice, then none of us has it. But I was haunted by a fact that there were few such marches and rallies and demonstrations in Germany in the lead up to the Nazi takeover in 1933. Dr. Wilson has made great contributions in Holocaust studies. And in speaking with those Jews who lived in Germany and Austria at the time, they felt they were alone. They were being persecuted solely because of their religious identity, but no one was marching with them in their behalf. There is nothing worse in the social justice arena than being alone. No one else to support you, no one else to help you, no one else to feel your pain, no one else to hold hands with you, no one else to be in a rally, a demonstration. They felt and they were alone. And as I marched in Hattiesburg and in Washington, D.C., and in New York City, and perhaps will march again and again in my life, I said to myself then and now on social justice, such people must never, never, ever again feel alone, because it can happen to any group, to any religious community, to any ethnic community, to any racial community. People face bigotry, they face hatred, and they face prejudice. But if they're not alone, and they have support from folks like you at Gordon, who do good social justice work, then we can overcome. And that's the true meaning, I think, of the Jewish concept of social justice. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof. Righteousness, 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 you shall pursue. And the rabbis had the final word on the word, pursue. Righteousness does not come to us as a guest. Righteousness doesn't just happen. You have to pursue it. You have to chase it. You have to create it. You have to form it. You have to work at it. You have to do it. Words by themselves mean little. So let me close again with those words from the Tanakh, from the Hebrew Bible. Tzedek, tzedek tirdof. Righteousness, righteousness, you shall pursue. Thank you very much.